For the first time since 2019, Call of Duty has acknowledged a phrase or a word in its patch notes specifically under Ricochet anti-cheat, and that is the word VPN. The term VPN for most people just means virtual private network, but for Call of Duty, the word VPN has taken on a very different usage. It is an entire back alleyway filled with shady salesmen, absolute snake oil services, and lots of misinformation that deliberately aims to confuse people in the hope of getting them to buy these services. So what exactly do Call of Duty mean when they say that they're going to be targeting VPN users with Ricochet anti-cheat? And why has the word VPN in Call of Duty suddenly taken on lots of misinformation? This is another one of the lovely deep dive videos that I'm bringing you today. If you find it interesting, drop a like and subscribe, and let me take you on a journey of how this little word, VPN, has suddenly become one of the most malicious sources in the Call of Duty franchise. Back in 2019, when Modern Warfare 2019 dropped and Warzone took over the stage in 2020, it became abundantly clear that skill-based matchmaking was a thing. I mean, during that era of Call of Duty, back in the day, you could even log into websites to see the KD ratio of the lobby that you just played in, and see how challenging some of the players you just faced in the lobby actually were. And the reality is, for a period of time, there was a noticeable increase where certain content creators, certain streamers, and certain competitive gamers were seemingly getting lobbies that were dead easy, whilst regular players sat at home were getting lobbies that were more challenging. So how can somebody who is allegedly a streamer or Warzone pro end up in an easier lobby than somebody who just plays casually? And this opened an entire back door to conversations around two-boxing, VPNing, and geofencing. And all of these conversations were ultimately just ways to subvert skill-based matchmaking. It was how are people approaching ways of making SBMM less painful in Call of Duty so they can achieve easier lobbies. And around 2020 to 2021, one of the biggest methods that started exploding onto the scene with lots of services that still to this day operate and still try to charge people for their services were VPNs. And for a period of time, around about 2021 into early 2022, these actually vaguely did work, but they haven't pretty much worked since then, and to this day, they are basically snake oil salesmen. You see, the word VPN doesn't mean what it means in the real world versus what it means in the COD world. In the real world, a virtual private network or VPN is simply a service that encrypts your internet traffic to protect your identity or just generally protect your browsing and search interactions. At the very best, it's probably a safety mechanism that can hopefully keep you a little bit safer online. At the very worst, it's basically just changing your IP address, which is equally as enforceable by most law departments, and probably will get traced down anyway. But in Call of Duty, VPNs are not VPNs, and this is going to be a little explainer as to how these things actually work. And all of these services, and I won't name them because I guarantee you they'll be upset at the contents of this video, don't actually change your IP address. These services don't actually provide you a virtual private network. All they use is open VPN connection protocols and a system called Smart DNS. And what this means is that rather than giving you a new IP address that hides your data and puts you in a different country, what they're actually doing is sending game-related traffic to distant locations whilst maintaining your own IP address. So what this means is that if your IP address is an IP based out of the United Kingdom, let's say London like me, that number is going to stay the same. So for Call of Duty's matchmaking system, they're still going to see a player from London, and they should be looking primarily for the best connectivity services for somebody who is in that region. But the game traffic that leaves the game and the matchmaking information that they send, they're sending to far, far away lands like Kazakhstan or something. And the reason they do that is because by sending your data far away and making it appear as though you might be on an extremely high ping or operating in a very difficult region, the idea is that it's supposed to trick the matchmaking system into abandoning skill, abandoning all of the other things it takes into consideration for matchmaking, and simply just prioritizing connection to give you the lowest possible latency experience. And because you still have a UK IP address, it just means it's going to try and slap you into the closest server. The thinking behind these services is that basically what will occur is that it will give you more lobby variance because it won't be accounting for things like SBMM, it won't be accounting for things like skill, KD, lobby composition. It will simply just be saying, right, this guy's connection data seems to be all over the place, it seems to be obscured and obfuscated, let's just throw him into the best connectivity to make sure he has an okay gaming experience. And for a period of time, this did actually work. Sending that gameplay data into different regions really did confuse the matchmaking service and really did, for the most part, produce easier lobbies. But that has not been the case for a very, very long time. Call of Duty's matchmaking algorithm happens entirely on their own servers, and there's no way of interpreting how they view data. And it's safe to say, since the explosion of VPNs, they have all but abandoned connectivity, generally speaking, in favor of super aggressive skill-based matchmaking. And I can tell you this for free because I have a server that's next to my doorstep that gives me 2 milliseconds of ping, and I still regularly get put into lobbies as high as 40 milliseconds. From my experience as well, although this isn't entirely accurate and I can't be entirely certain it is the case, I'm pretty sure Call of Duty has implemented a system where it gets your client to ping all of the available open servers upon launching the client, to therefore almost geolocate where you actually are. There's also a very good chance that they are aware of these open VPN connection protocols and smart DNS systems, and simply just look at the fact that your IP address comes from a certain location, ignores where the game traffic is going, and will just matchmake you normally. So all in all of these services that claim to provide easier lobbies, bot lobbies, give you the time of your life, basically haven't been working for a number of years now. And the only way to truly add variance to your lobby system is to play at different times of the day. Pretty much anyone playing before peak hours is going to be getting much more varied lobbies because of an open matchmaking pool. And to some extent, geofencing, which is what some of these services claim to offer to some extent, which is basically just the process of making it impossible for your internet connection to connect to anything beyond a certain ping radius. For example, if I was so inclined, I could make it that my game and my client and my internet router could only connect to any server inside the United Kingdom. But even then, considering how high the player population is in Call of Duty, something like that isn't even guaranteed to give you lobby variants or easy lobbies. So the idea of this Call of Duty VPN, or VPNs giving you easy games, has basically been total nonsense for the best part of a large couple of years now. So what does Call of Duty mean when it say that it's going to be targeting VPN players? Well, what Call of Duty is actually referring to is out-of-region players who are physically getting into servers they shouldn't be in. Specifically, they're adjusting the ping thresholds that require players to play certain matches in their region to cut down on VPN abuse. What they mean by this statement is that they are now analyzing connections that are coming into the game to see if ping is varying over a certain level and see where possible they can identify a player who is not meant to be in this region playing in a different region. The reason why they're doing that and the reason they're going about this is for something that I've been talking about for a number of years now. The entirety of European servers have been pretty much at the mercy of out-of-region players, primarily from Asia and China, for a number of years now. There was a period of time, in fact multiple periods of time over Warzone 2 and Warzone 3.0, where European lobbies were basically being dominated by out-of-region players. There were multiple lobbies where you would have 3 or 4 different teams, often from China, all cheating in the game. And you would regularly see advertisements for cheats for Call of Duty in Mandarin in game chat. That's how common out-of-region players had become. The advertisers felt it was worthwhile paying for bots to matchmake into these games to advertise to other out-of-region players. It's a reason that I have straight up advocated before for straight up geo-locking servers across Europe, because they had reached a point in Europe where it was basically unplayable. There wouldn't be a single game of Warzone that had gone by where you couldn't get into a match without some player or squad from a different region, primarily from China or Asia, just straight up full hard hacking, full hard cheating as hard as they humanly could in the game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pat myself on the back and claim that the reason this change is happening is because of the vocalness of that problem. Granted, I have been vocal about it, and I hope Call of Duty has seen it. But the reality is that Call of Duty probably has pretty hardline data in their own hands that now suggests that a large number of out-of-region players are having a substantial impact on European or American lobbies. In America, it tends to be players from Korea and different regions in Asia. In Europe, it tends to be players from China. In China, the game isn't even licensed at all and they shouldn't be able to play it, but naturally do through VPN usage. And in areas like Korea, the game has its own localized servers, but lots of them tend to leave into more European or American servers due to the cheating problems within their own regions. I will specify at this point that cheating definitely does happen in region as well. But the fact that this change is going ahead means that Call of Duty has verified that these guys are having an astronomical impact out of region on players who are playing within their own region. To give you an example of just how much certain regions or certain systems can actually be comparable to video games, Apex Legends very recently dropped the ability for the game to be played on Linux because it found that the player base on Linux had a much larger impact in terms of cheating due to how open the Linux-based systems are. So they straight up culled anybody playing on a Linux operating system going forward for Apex Legends. In the sense of Call of Duty, it likely means at this point, going through their anti-cheat data and going through their ban data, that they have pretty much statistically identified that the largest amount of cheating and the largest impacts coming from cheating are in fact coming from out-of-region sources. So what this likely means going forward is that Call of Duty is going to be analyzing connections of players coming in, and if they see fluctuations in their ping, or if they see that they're going above certain ping thresholds in terms of data going to and from the client, or to and from the VPN service, they will probably close those connections and boot those players from the game. And it's very likely that they will shadow ban them. So what does this mean? Can you still play with friends from different regions, like in America or different parts of the world? The answer is pretty much yes. So long as you aren't changing your active IP address or routing data over different clienteles or different services, it's very likely that nothing's going to change here. If you play with a buddy from US East, that's not going to be a problem. What will be a problem is that if you are somebody who VPNs to a different region, you probably will get shadow banned. And we have done this ourselves in the past. You know, myself as a streamer, and I will be honest about this, and I have been honest about this in my live streams, when we found servers got too infested with cheaters in Europe, we did actually VPN ourselves over to somewhere like the United States. Not one of the sketchy Call of Duty VPNs that doesn't actually do its job, just something bog standard like NordVPN or ExpressVPN, simply to server hop us to US East and hopefully get us away from a very large cheating situation. Whilst I don't think Ricochet Anti-Cheat will necessarily be looking at actual installed clients on your system, because there are lots of valid reasons to use a VPN outside of Call of Duty, I think they will be keeping an active eye on your IP address, the data coming from your system, and the data coming from your account. And if they see lots of different changes in IP addresses that don't match up or end up being in different regions or end up being in different countries, or see obvious signs of VPNs which they can detect, chances are they're probably going to shadow ban you. And they're probably going to put you in a shadow ban loop for as long as humanly possible to basically make it clear that if you are an out-of-region player connecting to servers you're not meant to be in, you won't be allowed to do that. This is pretty much a win-win situation for everybody, but there is one exception to this, and I do feel a little bit bad for them because it does feel like they're being a little bit chucked to the wind here. It's Australia. Now, if you're an Australian gamer and you've played Call of Duty or other games, it's actually fairly common for Australians to connect to US West. And the reason for that is, say for example, ranked play in Warzone or Call of Duty historically just hasn't had a high enough population of players in Australia for them to be able to actually play games over there. So they end up VPNing to US West to try and get into those lobbies even at a substantially worse ping. And I think the reality going forward is that if you are an Australian playing at 150 to 180 latency on a US West server, chances are you probably are going to get shadow banned going forward. There's definitely a conversation to be had about adjusting the player pools over in Australia or changing playlists so that there's less active playlists available to increase the population count, and there's definitely some things that they could do to remedy those situations, and generally speaking, more server availability in more regions is a good thing. But at the moment, this is very much taking a decision that might affect 5% of players to create a better experience for 95% of players. And for most people, whilst that may sound harsh, the reality is that Call of Duty aren't just doing this by accident. They're doing this because they have data, they have information that has told them that this is now a valid approach to try and deal with the cheating situation in Black Ops 6. And Call of Duty so far has intervened on 500,000 games in Black Ops 6 to deal with suspicious accounts. And as somebody who's been playing it since release, in Europe at least, I can say I haven't encountered a single cheater bar one person with an unlock tool that was banned by the time he hit level 20. There are some more mitigations coming in. When Warzone integrates, for example, it will be using the new kernel driver, it will be using the new systems that we've spoken about in previous videos, and by the looks of things, they're trying to very much make an active effort to improve the situation on the ground. We don't know how that's going to go, I'll be honest with you, the proof is very much in the pudding, but at the bare minimum now, we can safely say out-of-region players are actually on the radar for the first time and probably will be dealt with. So folks, if you found this video and breakdown interesting, make sure to like this video, drop a like on the stream, drop a little subscribe. We are on the road to 200k, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.